everybody. Cool. So today I'm going to talk about why I picked this talk, do a little discussion about like what a power user is and what their persona is like, and how we're like playing off of it, some more specific accessibility stuff, and then some case studies where I think these things have actually gone well in certain apps, and then next steps that you can take away in your own work. So yeah, I'm Ryan. I work on PayPal checkouts, doing some product work and some things on the web platform team. In the past, maybe 5 or so years ago, I've done some pretty big web accessibility overhauls at big e-commerce sites that you've probably used. And as it pertains to this talk, a lot of my interest for it is growing up in a deaf family, having ASL as my first language, growing up around sign language interpreters, blind, deafblind people. It's like really affected how I see, just assistive technology in general, how people are using it. So I want to tell you a story about why I picked the talk. 8 years ago, me and my partner were just starting our careers. I was doing the JavaScript stuff, and she was a lawyer, and she had just gotten out of law school, and she did really well, went to a good school, winning like moot court competitions, had a lot of accolades, and she passed the bar on the first try, all the stuff you want to see. But when she started getting interviews, she got interviews at good places. One of the better places in our state, she went and interviewed there with a senior partner. And like one of the first questions they asked her was like, if you're blind, how do you read? Other questions were like, who's helping you do your work? So it didn't go well, to say the least. It's hard to get into the brass tacks of like, you know, practicing law if they start with like questioning like if you're literate. So anyways, the punchline of that is that she actually started her own law firm, and it's one of the biggest employment law firms in the state. And yeah, she's actually won cases against those people. Yep. And she's also a traditionally published novelist at the same time, and she's got a book coming out next year and a few more on the way. So needless to say, she's getting stuff done. Although her story is a positive one, this mindset is like not unique to lawyers, and I think it's really pervasive. But obviously, in my career field, I've seen it as well. And so I want to do the talk to kind of compare and contrast there and see if we can take some lessons from it. So almost positive, if you've worked in accessibility, you've heard these things. Especially when you're asking like, okay, should we do it? We don't have disabled users. Disabled people aren't in a hurry, or we can make it accessible later. Like from a naive perspective, this might seem like these are valid questions, but I do think they're the result of just being culturally unaware and just like going with status quo about what the mind think is about treating accessibility. So I want to propose a different mental model for reasoning about users with disabilities, and especially those using assistive technology. So yeah, it's very clear to me that there are stereotypes about what disabled users are doing, and like how they use the computer and stuff like that. That is like fundamentally causing a first principles problem here, like cognitive dissonance. So I want to talk about power users. This is the Wikipedia definition. It's user of computer software, other electronic devices, uses advanced features of computer hardware, operating systems, programs, or websites that are not used by the average user. A power user might not have extensive technical knowledge of the systems they use, but is rather characterized by competence or desire to make the most intensive use of computer programs or systems. So to go further into that, these are the people who know all the keyboard shortcuts. They love telling you about it, about your workflow. They evangelize it. They're always giving feedback to the people making their tools or even working on the tools themselves. Always looking for efficiency improvements. Ergonomics matter to them a lot, and they are usually not satisfied or well served with casual experiences. I want to contrast that with a disabled, like I'm quoting power user, who is also learning their tools very deeply, using advanced features. They're very loyal to those tools. They don't like to change them often because these tools have a high learning curve, and they prioritize efficiency as well. because of the learning curve, they're really sensitive to changes in functionality that affect their workflows, and efficiency is extremely important. With a person who can use a mouse and can use a keyboard, the order of magnitude for like not being able to do one or the other isn't that big. But if you break the workflow for somebody who can only use a screen reader, it can become extremely slow. Like a 5-second task now takes like several minutes, something like that, or even longer. So I made this diagram. I believe there's a really complete overlap between these two user personas. And I think if we treat our assistive tech users the same way that we would treat market to prioritize a power user, we could get really good outcomes pretty much across the board. The benefits here, in terms of just thinking about it, you have average customer value going up. The reason is because these are like stable long-term users of your product, so they realize lots of value. Like they're literally professionals with it. And they can make it work for them with like minimum friction and maximum impact. They're probably going to be the ones writing like all the customer reviews for you. They'll be the otaku people. Like if you hear somebody, a friend of a friend was like telling me that I got to use this app, it's probably going to be like this class of user. And what's so attractive about them is they help you market and sell your product because they're enthusiasts and cheerleaders. They'll provide testimonials, case studies, and they'll just refer your service to everybody they know and build communities there. I want to take a step back and define accessibility and usability. For me, accessibility has more to do with, can I do a task? Can I technically do the task? Is there anything blocking me from just like actually completing it? And usability is more addressing like, how well can I do that task? How effectively? Like in timely manner. When we talk about compliance-based accessibility, this is like the traditional work that we're all doing, that we get assigned our JIRA tickets after we get sued. This is basic stuff though. Color contrast, keyboard navigation, font sizes, captions, focus, more stuff like that. AA is the standard that they hold you to, and then AAA is feasible. And if you have a specialized app, some of those AAAs would be required because they're like really pertinent to the use case. In terms of the automated testing that we'd use for that, there's Axe. That's going to be in like most of your front-end frameworks. There's going to be some way to put Axe into like Jest or Playwright or something like that, where it just like statically analyzes what's going on and tells you if you have some kind of violation. And they map pretty cleanly to these WCAG guidelines. You also have Wave and Lighthouse, which are more like Chrome plugins or whatever kind of browser plugins, where if you have a site running, you can hit a button and it'll give you a rundown of what's going on the site, and you could maybe click through it. On top of that, React testing library is actually quite good for catching accessibility stuff. If you write your queries well, if you use the accessible roles and like actually write the queries as if you're a screen reader user, that's really powerful. You can actually get quite a bit of surface area to cover stuff. So that being said, compliance and automated tools are just straight up not enough to ensure accessibility and usability. I pulled up this article that we found a few years ago where a guy actually like made a 100 Lighthouse score site that was straight up unusable. You couldn't click anything, you couldn't see anything. It's like really slow. Yeah, it's really funny. You should look it up. I have the link, but I remember Swick shared it with me. But yeah, the point is, if you can do that on purpose, you can definitely do it on accident. Yeah. So if you can follow the WCAG, but you choose like not to take the time to test the implementations by real users, I think you're exhibiting a lack of care to like take time for people who can help make your product more accessible. And what it looks like is a success gap between classes of users, just due to poorly planned or poorly vetted feature development. Yeah, accessibility testing can be partially automated, but the usability testing, which is going to drive success for power users, people who don't have a lot of time and are trying to accomplish tasks quickly, that kind of testing and validation can only really be done by people. But that being said, it is all the automated stuff is important. It's like TypeScript, it's like the static analysis layer almost of like, okay, cool. I'm covering most of the dumb stuff, so I don't have to think about that so much. Then I can focus on like these core workflows and like optimizing and milking everything out of them. I have a few case studies I wanted to go over for apps that I think are getting this right and making first-class experiences for like disabled power users. And I think they're best in breed and have staying power because they're doing that. Discord is the first one. Normally, you have to read some docs to figure out how to do special keyboard stuff. In Discord, the first time you hit tab like 3 times, it has a pop-up and it's like, hey, buddy, you're tabbing through stuff. Guess what? There's like all these other ways you can do that even faster to jump around and get to stuff and interact with things. It tells you how to use the keyboard shortcuts, and then you pull those up. And it's great because normally you'd have to like tab to a message, read the message, then you're tabbing to a button to get to the emoji picker. Then you open that up. Then you like tab to the thing you want, or you tab to you're just tabbing everywhere. If you have the ability to just like go to a message, there's contextual key bindings where you can just hit a thing and like, boom, you have a heart or whatever. And it's customizable to the point where you could even do more specific workflows for that. If you like had a specific emoji, you always hit it or something like that. You also have drag and drop for organizing lists, which is super cool. Adjustable text to speech, and just for like across the board accessibility accommodation stuff, like reduce motion, color blindness settings, things like that is like all really changeable, which is cool. It's also one of the few apps that makes adding alt text really easy, and then giving you inline support to like make sure it's like, hey, here's a help article to like make better ones if you're worried about it. VS Code is actually amazing. It has so many cool power features for this kind of thing. It's kind of mind-blowing. So it has audio cues. So normally if you have like a TypeScript error, you have like a squiggly or a warning squiggly, they all have different sounds. If you scroll past the breakpoint with the screen reader, it makes a different sound. If you have like a build error, it's a different sound. And anything that can be tracked as an event in VS Code, you can also make unique events for that. It's really cool. Every action is a command. So like every discrete action you can do in VS Code is like a piece of functionality that you can then plug into like other stuff in the app. So it's really extensible in terms of like workflows that you can create. And then you can like tie that into like voice commands and just do all kinds of things in a really cool, efficient way, depending on what your setup was. Obviously, the theme is very customizable. You have the command palette, which is great. That's innovated by Sublime Text back in the day. But then you see this feature in like every power user app now. Superhuman for email. This app has a fantastic one. Obviously, things like Raycast. It's really cool. But for this, it's amazing. And then depending on what kinds of stuff you have going on, there's Zen modes. If you have like ADHD, it's really good to just like bleed the UI away and just focus on your code. I was like debating whether to include this one because I don't know how long it'll be true for. But Twitter does have amazing accessibility. Their team is wonderful, was wonderful. I love that they made alt text a first-class citizen of the UI. I feel like millions of people know about alt text and what good alt text is now that just wouldn't have any clue what it was before, which is amazing. It has really good keyboard shortcuts. And like I mentioned with Discord, it makes it really easy to just be on a message and contextually take an action instead of fumbling through the buttons to figure out how to take an action. And then the UI is pretty customizable in terms of colors and things like that. So I have compiled a list of next steps you can take as an organization to address some of these things. And kind of in priority order, I think the absolute most impact thing you can do is hiring disabled developers, designers, and leadership. And it's actually leadership first. From the top down, you need that. Because if they're bought in and they understand the concerns and the needs, you won't make so many dumb mistakes because intuitively you just would never make them. And so that's really where it starts. You'll get the most mileage out of that. But without that, you have to do trading on your own to kind of get there with your own knowledge. So regularly measuring time to complete critical app workflows with assistive tech. I think you would call this usability testing. I'm just even more specifically saying usability testing with specific assistive tech setups. So like with a screen reader, with a braille display. Yeah, even like mouth control, it really depends on what you have going on. Yeah. Including accessibility immersives as part of onboarding. There are certain companies, I think the Q is one of them, I'm not sure, but you can like go on site and get really super good accessibility training. So like not just learning how to use the tech, but you can simulate like macular degeneration, retinitis pigmentosa, all these different types of blindness, so that if you did that and you learned the tech, I think it can really help you understand what you're dealing with and who you're building for. Making accessibility part of OKRs and evaluation across the org is a great way of holding yourself accountable to doing those things and living your values, so to speak. Onboarding and documentation are really important. Having good tooling is great, but oftentimes this is custom and it's not something that's going to be able to be looked up anywhere else. So you have to provide the docs and maybe even reach out to specific users, have great knowledge bases. Discord had a good example of that, where it kind of like jumps up and it's like, hey, I see you might be trying to use this. Those kinds of things are really great. It goes without saying, I think from your product leadership all the way through design and to development, everybody actually needs to be able to understand how to use screen readers and keyboard users. As a baseline, I really think you have to do that to build the empathy required to make sound decisions around products. And then when it comes to UX and community building, you always need to make sure that you're including disabled users. Getting feedback from them in forums like where it's more about like product support, and then also building actual community. For individuals, I would say some of the same things. I would say learn assistive tech very deeply, get very good with the keyboard nav, get very good with the screen reader, and I have a few listed. So like if you're a Mac person, definitely do voiceover. Talkback is probably also relevant. It depends on what kind of stuff you're doing, but yeah, one of them will pretty much get you ready for all of them. Get good at writing really good alt text. It makes a big difference. Just writing it is one thing, but I think if you actually look up what good alt text is, you can make a big difference. Listen to disabled voices and make disabled friends. It's really going to help you build empathy. And participate in accessibility and disability communities. Depending on where you are, that might be hard. You can go online and definitely meet people. I know there's like Slack groups and things like that. Yeah. So I want to like begin to close by saying the problem here is that you can't build products for people that you've never met. Going back to the story, like people don't even believe that high performing disabled people exist, and yet I would say they're pretty much everywhere. And I've met so many, and so the point is the exclusion in our industry is the problem, and the better outcomes can only be reached by including disabled users in research, hiring disabled people in leadership and product development, learning the tools that those users use, and expanding our cultural horizons so that we can stop causing poor user outcomes from lack of awareness. So looking in the future, until now, disability tech has been like an overlooked multi-trillion-dollar global market in terms of the total statistics. It's actually bigger than the GDP of China, I believe. So disability is a through line for the entire global population. And as people age and the rate of non-communicable diseases rises, the global disability community is going to be 3.5 billion by 2050, which is up 130%. So as stewards of the next wave of technology, we have to make sure that we're building systems and tools that include as many people as possible. And at the pace technology is accelerating, we're running out of excuses not to do so. So like I put in the slides, we have self-driving cars coming. We have AI mixed with augmented reality. So you're gonna be able to put on glasses, you're gonna be able to figure out all kinds of stuff. We have really fancy refreshable braille displays that are like multi-cell that are becoming affordable. So deaf-blind people are probably gonna pretty accessibly easy make it easy for them to become coders in the next wave of educated kids learning this tech. So I think companies and individuals who embrace these changes will be at a distinct competitive advantage over those who don't. That's all I got. Thank you.